The tradition of the House. Upon inauguration, the members shall attend to the audience of the President. At such times it is common to fawn on his agenda for the blessing to have served. Lyon has none of that.
We are co-equal branches on the tree of democracy. We are co-equal branches, I'm not on bended knee. We are co-equal branches on the tree of democracy. We are co-equal branches, I'll not attend to thee.
Tradition of the Lord's attending, White Aristocrat Association for mutual admiration. Lyon has none of that.
We are co-equal branches on the tree of democracy. We are co-equal branches, I'll not attend to thee. We are co-equal branches on the tree of democracy. We are co-equal branches, I'm not on bended knee.
For tradition of the House, upon inauguration, the members shall attend to His Excellency the President. He is the heir to the American throne. Let it be known.
President of the Fairhaven Historical Society. On behalf of the Society, I'd like to welcome you to this day celebrating the life and legacy of one of our most famous founders, Matthew Lyon. And now I'd like to introduce our MC to you. Some of you may recognize him from the ice at Spartan Stadium. Some of you might recognize him as the voice of Catamount Radio. But I know him best as our State Senator, Brian Collmore. Please welcome.
Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, everybody. Some of you maybe actually have yelled at me at Spartan Arena if I made a bad call on the ice. I was a referee, still am, for about 40 years. So on behalf of the Fairhaven Historical Society, I want to welcome you to Matthew Lyon Day. And as Victoria said, I'm State Senator Brian Collmore. Also with me today is State Senator Terry Williams. I want to recognize him. I have to admit, when Walter asked me about attending and emceeing the ceremony today, pretty much all I knew about Matthew Lyon was that there was a portrait of him hanging up in the State House, and that he's the only person to ever be elected to the U.S. Congress while in jail. And that's a true statement. Hopefully today all of us can learn a little bit more about Matthew. And before we move to today's speakers, a little about him. He was born in Ireland in 1749, came to America in 1765 when he was still in his teens. He worked as an indentured servant, first in Connecticut and then in Vermont, paying off the cost of his passage in 4 years. In 1774, Matthew Lyon moved to Wallingford, which was then known as the New Hampshire Grants. He farmed there and organized a company militia. Then he moved to Arlington, Vermont in 1777 and served as a member from Arlington in the Vermont House of Representatives from 1779 to 1783, and thankfully he moved again to Fairhaven, where he founded this town of Fairhaven. And he was here from 1783, which is when he founded it, and then he returned to the State House as their representative. In fact, this park was donated by Matthew Lyon to the town so that they could establish a town park, and we're still enjoying it. So I'd like to now introduce Keith Heyer, who will read the Select Board proclamation that declares the third Saturday in July as Matthew Lyon Day. Keith is the varsity football team's line coach, including the 2024 Vermont State High School Division Championship, and unfortunately last year's dramatic loss in the championship game to Colchester High School. So, Keith, come on up.
Proclamation for Fairhaven Select Board. Whereas Matthew Lyon was a significant figure in the history of the United States of America, celebrated as Vermont's champion of free speech for his staunch advocacy for democratic principles and civil liberties. Whereas he was improvisioned immigrant boy from Ireland who was sold as an indentured servant but rose to prominence through his work ethic, relentless spirit, and dedication to public service, as well as his patriotism as a warrior with Ethan Allen at Fort Ticonderoga and an officer of the Continental Army during the battles of Bennington, Saratoga, in the American Revolution. Whereas Matthew Lyon was founder of Fairhaven, and through his entrepreneurship developed Fairhaven into a successful mill town, built the first school, hired the first teacher, donated 10 acres of land nearby, as well as the land for the town green that we are all using as of now, and served as Western Vermont's representative to Congress. Whereas Mr. Lyon is most noted for his powerful defense of the people's First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and of the press. He was was imprisoned under the Sedition Act of 1798. Re-elected to a second term while in jail, Lyon returned to Congress and broke the presidential deadlock by casting the deciding vote to elect Thomas Jefferson as our third president of the United States. We, the duly elected select board of the town of Fairhaven, hereby proclaim July 18th, 2026, Matthew Lyon Day, to be celebrated thereafter on the third Saturday of July to commemorate his many extraordinary achievements for the people of Fairhaven, the state of Vermont, and the United States of America. Thank you all.
Up next is Peter Patton, who is a longtime reenactor, mostly in military uniforms. Today he is dressed as Matthew Lyon and will tell the story of Matthew Lyon as his own. Not to give you a spoiler alert, but in the middle of his address, Peter will be interrupted as he is talking about the spitting incident in Congress that made him a national figure. And James Shorey will take the stage and will sing The Wooden Sword, a song from the rock musical Spittin' Lion. At the end of the song, Patton will spit in Shorey's face. Shorey will say, "This is not over," and Patton will then tell the rest of the story of Matthew Lyon, including the attack that took place 2 weeks later. So Peter and James, if you would.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's grand to be back here in Fairhaven. It's been a while now, and you've done a lovely job with the village here. Absolutely fantastic. I remember when I donated this part, it was merely a pasture and a cattle feeding place, and you had to watch where you stepped. Maybe you still do with the dogs, I don't know. But at any rate, it's great to be here, and the village has just largely expanded since our early days. I'm glad to see so many distinguished people here. The governor, I haven't seen Tom Chittenden in ages since I left for Kentucky, so it's good to see him. We got Beulah, your daughter's out there with, and my daughter, or your daughter, and I married, by the way, if you didn't know, I married Beulah Chittenden and had a family, and we all eventually ended up in Kentucky. So that's the Kentucky reference. At any rate, it's grand to be here, and I can't see too many familiar buildings. I know we called where the Congregational Church was, we called that the Lord's Barn. But that wasn't, I think it was an earlier version of the Congregational Church, not that particular building. Because I was out of here by 1801. At any rate, I'll give you a little bit of my story here. I was born in Ireland, as the lads mentioned, 276 years ago, and when I was just 12, my father was hung, as he was some sort of a rebel, and that was the end of him. But ever since then, I've been kind of a despised monarchs, aristocrats, and those who acted like them. I was taken out of school and made to work and learn the trade of a printer for the next 3 years. It was then that I was lured by a ship's captain who said money and land could be had in the colonies of America. So I agreed to be a cabin boy, but since once at sea I became deathly seasick, I think you can all relate to that, I couldn't work at all, so to pay my passage I was sold into servitude. Now the man who brought me was the first American millionaire, Jabez Bacon. He took me to his pig farm in Connecticut. I didn't like it there, so I was sold to another man for the yoke of 2 bull oxen. And that furnished me with my favorite saying, by the bulls that bought me. Eventually, I worked off my term and went to the Ethan Allen's foundry. I married Mr. Allen's niece, Mary Hosford, and soon we had 4 children. In the spring of 1774, I moved my family to the Hampshire Grants. New Hampshire and New York were fighting over this territory, so Ethan Allen and his friends formed the Green Mountain Boys to protect our land. And I and the Minutemen from the north, with Colonel Ethan Allen and Colonel Benedict Arnold, on the fateful night of May 10th, 1775, we crossed Lake Champlain at Shoreham and captured Fort Ticonderoga with its 50 men, 24 women and children. It's especially proud we were of capturing the officer's wine and rum cellar as well. We properly celebrated American colony's first victory against the British. I decided to join George Washington's Continental Army. I was appointed a lieutenant and ran into some difficulty in my first assignment in Jericho. Frightened by a large number of Abenaki and Mohawk natives heading our way, my men mutinied, and all the other officers followed them as well. I went to General St. Clair and reported what had happened. Well, the general cashiered us all, including myself, who tried my best to stop my men from running away. Later, General Gates not only restored my commission as an officer, he promoted me to captain and made me paymaster of Seth Warner's Green Mountain Rangers. We fought shoulder to shoulder at Bennington and Saratoga, where General Burgoyne surrendered his entire army to us. It was then I decided to remain here in the north and work with my good friend Tom Chittenden to help develop the new and independent Republic of Vermont. We were proud of being the first to outlaw slavery anywhere in North America. In 1779, Tom Chittenden and myself and 75 others were granted tracts of land here in Fairhaven. The next few years were busy ones. The town needed a grist mill, so I built one. We needed a forge and a lumber mill, so I built them as well. To run all these industries, we needed water power, so I built a dam on the Upper Falls. Now the Upper Falls is where the railroad depot is now. We needed a school, and I built one of those and hired the first teacher. The town needed a tavern, and I built that as well. I never kept my political opinions to myself, so I started a little paper called the Farmer's Library. Because I needed paper to print on it, I also built a paper mill. While searching for a better way of producing commercial-grade paper, I invented the process we still use to this day for making paper. Now my son James, who learned the printing trade from none other than Ben Franklin himself, and he did the printing of the paper, and we filled the pages with my beliefs about politics and the rights of man. Our Bill of Rights says, the people have a right of freedom of speech and of writing and publishing their sentiments. Concerning the transactions of government, my belief that our freedom of the press never ought to be restrained did not lessen when I became involved in politics. You see, by this time, I had served in the Vermont General Assembly, and in 1798, I was especially proud to represent the people of the 1st District of Vermont in Congress. We met in Philadelphia. Some of you younger folks might not realize that Philadelphia was the national capital at one time. And this was the place, and there were all kinds of characters there, to say the least. I hate to say it, but I took a dislike to President John Adams. I believed him to be pompous and pretentious, and like a snobbish aristocrat. You may have heard me called the Spittin' Lion. Now, there's a story. Here comes Congressman from Connecticut, Roger Griswold. He will insult me on the floor of Congress.
Fight for democracy. You use your wooden sword. I hear the wheat is dangerous in Jericho. You wield that wooden dagger and shall splinter in your paw. How'd you love your hometown, Mr. Lyon? When you come to Connecticut to fight for democracy, will you brandish that mighty pine? Is it long enough for the job? Are you hard of hearing? You're certainly hardly worth hearing. Tell me now, you fight for democracy, use your wooden sword, wear your badge of cowardice with your wife, fight for democracy, and I could take you at your word. But will you wear your woody for us to observe? And you fight for democracy, the Revolutionary War, and you poke the British with your sword. How does it feel, sir? Carry a wooden sword. You are a coward and a scoundrel. How does that sound, sir? Behold, the warrior of the wooden sword. This isn't over.
I did not hit him, but I did spit on him. The wetter of two evils. For 2 weeks, my colleagues argued and entertained motions to expel me from Congress, but lost each time. Then my dishonoring Griswold came to a head. Mine. He purchased a new hickory walking stick while I was writing at my desk, writing letters to my constituents. He struck me without any warning, beating me as though I was a slave or an indentured servant. I struggled to escape the sudden and violent attack, ducking behind the speaker's chair and grabbing the fireplace tongs to defend myself. No doubt you've seen the cartoon of our fight. Each day's vote on the motion to expel both of us from Congress failed to carry. Of course, the more I wrote and spoke against the President and the Federalists, the more unpopular I became with President Adams and his cronies in Congress and the Supreme Court. In an attempt to finally get rid of me and other journalists, Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Act in 1798. Now, the Alien Law never resulted in the expulsion of any aliens, but the Sedition Law provided heavy fines and imprisonment for anyone speaking or publishing any criticism of the President or his government. They accused me in 3 counts of violating this totally unconstitutional act. A bogus trial was held in Rutland. They stacked the jury, found me guilty, and the Federalist judge, William Patterson, sentenced me to 4 months in prison and an enormous $1,000 fine. To add insult to injury, I was paraded slowly from Rutland to Virginia and thrown into a filthy cell. The cell had a small window with only 1 iron bar to keep out the weather. The wretched jailer even denied me paper and pen. I know my fellow Green Mountain boys, they hatched a plan to break me out, but I refused them. My dear second wife, Beulah, who is here today, sold some of our land, paid my fine in gold, and I was finally released. Oh, did I mention that I was running for re-election from my jail cell? Imagine a presidential election where no one is allowed to say anything that criticizes the president or the government. I am proud to say that I was re-elected by a big majority of Vermont voters and quickly traveled to Philadelphia upon my release from Virgins. Trouble was brewing in Philadelphia. John Adams was running for president again, with Charles Pinckney of South Carolina for vice president. Tom Jefferson and Aaron Burr were the Democratic Republican candidates for president and vice president. Now back then, the electors voted for two men. Whoever got the most votes was president. Well, Adams and Pinckney fell far short, but Jefferson and Burr were tied. So it was up to Congress to break that tie. We had 36 ballots. I went on for 6 days, and it went on for 6 days and nights, this balloting. I voted for Jefferson each one of those 35 times. Now my colleague from Vermont, Lewis Morris, voted for Burr. Now, good old Lewis was absent from the 36th ballot, voted for Jefferson, thus breaking the tie and making Tom Jefferson the third president of the United States. That was one of my proudest moments, and one of my proudest votes, and one of the things I would most like to be remembered for. So thank you to Fairhaven for remembering on this special day, and it's wonderful to be back here all these many centuries later. Thank you very much.
And James, I got to believe that Matthew Lyon is refreshed to know how well people get along in the U.S. Congress today. There's never any rancor there. Fairhaven's Historical Society is honored to have our next guest speak. Our very special guest today is Governor Phil Scott. Governor Scott's public service career began when he was elected in 2000 as a member of the Senate, serving 5 terms representing Washington County. While he was in the Senate, he served as Vice Chair of the Transportation Committee and Chair of the Senate Institutions Committee. In 2010, he ran successfully for the office of Lieutenant Governor, where he served 3 terms before being elected governor. Phil Scott became our 82nd governor in January of 2017 and was re-elected to a 5th term in 2024, winning a majority in every city and town in the state. In fact, in his 2020, 2022, and 2024 re-elections, he earned more votes than any candidate for governor in the history of the state. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Phil Scott.
Thank you very much, Brian. Really appreciate it. And for those who don't know, we do have a Thomas Chittenden who is in the Senate at this point in time, a descendant of Thomas Chittenden. And Brian and Terry actually work with him on a daily basis. It really is great to be here. Matthew Lyon, I'm curious as to whether you got all your Act 250 permits when you built all this around. I'm guessing it probably wasn't an issue at that point, but certainly Fairhaven is much better off for your existence here. You know, it's remarkable in some ways. We're here to recognize one of the most remarkable people in Vermont, but perhaps one of the lesser known historical figures across the country. This year, as our nation celebrates the 250th anniversary, it's an important time to reflect on the people who helped shape America, and Matthew Lyon was certainly one of those people. Like many of the men and women who built this country, he was outspoken, determined, and at times controversial. But his lasting contribution isn't just about his words, beliefs, or the time he spent in office, or even the fight he got into on the floor in Congress. It's more about the story that teaches us about America and why it's important to protect what's been created. As we just heard, Matthew Lyon was an interesting fellow But he was an immigrant from Ireland who joined the Green Mountain Boys and fought alongside Seth Warner at Bennington and Saratoga. He was tried, convicted, and jailed after criticizing President John Adams. Now that's certainly a colorful and important part of his story, but I'm not sure it's the most important part. It's what happened next that we need to pay attention to. While Matthew Lyon was in jail, as we heard, Vermonters re-elected him to Congress. Now think about that for just a moment. Whether they agreed with everything he said isn't really the point. The people of Vermont spoke loud and clear. They said the citizens, not the government, decide who represents them. That's a pretty big deal because it was a major test of the First Amendment in our newly born country. As we celebrate America's 250th birthday and we watch in real time some of our most important democratic institutions being tested, I think it's worth remembering why the founders built our government the way it did. Because it was truly unique and special. First of all, they didn't create a framework that depended on perfect leaders. But they did expect strong personalities, passionate disagreements, and political competition. They understood every generation would believe its challenges were unique. And they talked openly about these very things and how important it would be to have checks and balances. So the founders designed a constitutional system that balanced power instead of simply trusting those who held it. And I would argue that while not perfect, it served America pretty well for nearly 250 years. Now another important fact, 150 years after Vermonters sent a message by electing Matthew Lyon from a jail cell, another Vermonter, Senator Ralph Flanders, reminded America that constitutional principles are far more important than political parties. It was this quiet senator from Vermont who led the charge against fellow Republican, Senator Joe McCarthy, and hundreds of Americans were, as hundreds of Americans were being blacklisted for their political beliefs. Now, Lyon and Flanders lived in very different times, but they both put principle ahead of politics, something that seems to be in short supply these days. But Vermonters can be proud of the fact that they did, because leadership is about more than winning political arguments. It's also about leaving our institutions stronger than we found them. Now, Matthew Lyon's legacy reminds us that liberty is preserved by keeping the government accountable to the people. The Constitution doesn't divide power to protect government. It divides power to protect you. And if Matthew Lyon, and I know he's here, was standing with us today, I think that is probably what he would want us to celebrate today. So I appreciate being here. I appreciate getting to know a little bit more about Fairhaven, things that I didn't know about Matthew Lyon. But I especially appreciate all you're doing and all we can do together to protect the very foundation of our government. So thank you very much.
Very much, Governor Scott. Our next speaker is a very familiar face in Fairhaven, a graduate of Fairhaven High School and the public address announcer for Slater football games. Representative Bill Canfield was first elected to the Vermont House in 2005. He just completed his 21st year in the legislature. He is an excellent representative for Fairhaven, Benson, and West Haven. Bill is also vice chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Bill Canfield.
So, can you hear me? So if we were on the House floor in Montpelier right now, I would ask to speak on a point of personal privilege. So I'm going to do that. Before I deliver my prepared remarks, I would be remiss if I didn't express my appreciation to Matthew Lyon's early defense of the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. My family background, for those that don't know, my parents owned a weekly newspaper here in Fairhaven. It was the Fairhaven era. Later became the Fairhaven.
I mean, it's just
Vermont
staggering how easy you can do that.
My father
Yeah,
published,
and there is no-
edited, printed,
There's no.
not without the help of
There's
his
not
steady,
something
dependable employees. They were very capable. Kay Petty, who still resides here in Fairhaven today, Reuben St. John, and Paul Foley. My older brothers went on to work at the Fairhaven, Vermont era at the time. My brother Jim, also known as Hot Rod, he was employed there briefly, let's just say that. My brother Robert, known as Twig, he stayed on to help. Later in life, he offered contributing contributions, articles to the Lakes Region Free Press, and often wrote letters to the editor of the Rutland Herald. So thank you, Matthew Lyon, wherever you went. Thank you very much. Matthew Lyon had many accomplishments in his 58 years. I'm going to try not to duplicate what's been said here, so I'm going to skip down here. In 1777, he was one of 77 people granted tracts of land in what is now Fairhaven, Vermont. Some lands he later donated to the town of Fairhaven include the cemetery on West Street, which that corner church over there, that's the Methodist Church. West Street is right there, and that cemetery is on both sides. And Norma, I haven't found a name for that cemetery yet. Also included was the land where our library sits, and this beautiful park where we are today. Matthew Lyon served in Vermont Citizens Legislature. And I do not know how the Vermont's legislature operated when Matthew Lyon represented Fairhaven. I do know that now we have three things in place, which all members, House and Senate, must follow. And I'm sure Governor Scott remembers these from his time serving in the Vermont Senate. These guidelines are a dress code, rules of order, and decorum. Today in our State House in Montpelier, we have central heating. So no fire tongs are available for self-defense, as when Congressman Lyon earned his nickname the Spitting Lion. In contrast to those earliest post-revolution actions in Congress, in Montpelier, I have witnessed once where the presenter of a bill was interrogated by another member of the House. This is standard procedure, a usual occurrence. The interrogator was in doubt of the presenter's response to a question. He addressed the Speaker of the House that the presenter might not be telling the truth. The presenter responded, "Are you calling me a liar?" Someone immediately called for a point of order. At this time, the Speaker invited both members to approach the podium. Now, the House Clerk sits at the front, right in front of the Speaker's podium, and serves as the parliamentarian. The gavel sounded once. The Speaker declared the House would be in recess temporarily. The crowd gathered around the podium. After 5 or 10 minutes, 3 raps of the gavel, the Speaker called us back to order. The Speaker then found the point of order well taken to caution the interrogator to choose his words more wisely. The interrogator apologized to the presenter and then to the rest of the body for his outburst and continued on with his line of questioning. There was no attack with a cane, or self-defense with fire tongs, or spit. This verbal attack was dealt with and quelched in short order. And we all continued on doing the people's work. And it seems maybe we've come a long way with these notions of rules of order and decorum. Still today, at our state capitol, we welcome all to the People's House. Since I've been there, we have had 3 memorable disturbances in the House chamber while we were conducting business in session. Only this year, the Sergeant at Arms, along with Capitol Police, have initiated a single point of entry policy at the State House. This is where all visitors and guests are screened before entrance is granted. The right to peaceful assembly is always granted, usually outside, either on the front steps or on the front lawn of the State House. Although once in a while someone sneaks into the House chamber a banner emblazoned with a message of protest. Both the banner and that guest are quickly removed so we may continue on with our official business. At the State House, we now have an ethics committee and a sexual harassment committee. Both panels are made up of current elected legislators and senators who volunteer their time and take on these roles seriously. This is evidenced as within the past decade, one member was removed from office, and more recently, another resigning from office. Vermont Citizen Legislature remains part-time. We are budgeted for 18 weeks, from early January until mid-May. The only exception is town meeting week, when we were home for the week, without pay. This year we worked 2 weeks beyond the budgeted 18, finishing on May 30th. I want to thank the Fairhaven Historical Society for inviting me to share remarks as your elected representative to the Vermont Legislature, the same position Matthew Lyon held. I hope you all enjoy the remainder of the first annual Matthew Lyon Day.
Thank you, Bill. Our final speaker is the only one up here that can claim to have received a Matthew Lyon Award. Vermont Press Association each year offers the Matthew Lyon Award to an individual who has demonstrated an exceptional commitment to the First Amendment and to the public's right to know the truth in Vermont. I've known this gentleman for probably over 35 years. It's great to have him with us today. He is a talented and seasoned reporter, more than 40 years as a staff writer at the Burlington Free Press. He's covered local, state, and national news as well as sporting events, all with integrity and vigor. Mike is not only a veteran reporter and a volunteer advocate, but also a dedicated educator as well. He's an adjunct professor of journalism at St. Michael's College in Colchester. Please welcome Mike Donahue.
Thank you, Senator. And I've actually seen him referee games. I've seen him pass laws. And, yes, we go back quite a few years. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
You need to talk closer to the mic.
Okay.
So that people in the back might not be able to hear it.
Senator Colin Moore has
There we go.
noted, and some of the speakers have talked about Matthew Lyon, but they all scooped me, so you can tell the radio is always ahead of the newspaper. As electronics, we have to print it and everything like that. So, as Brian said, I'm Mike Donahue. I was a reporter at the Burlington Free Press for 46 years. I still offer stories to local newspapers as a freelancer, including the Rutland Herald and so forth. my biggest claim today is I've been much of my life a big fan of Matthew Lyon, who I first learned about while doing a college paper back in taking a Vermont history class in 1975. And as noted, I'm a recipient of the Matthew Lyon Award. I was given a special invitation today by Victoria and Walter from the Historical Society. Victoria somehow found me and asked me if I would come and talk a little bit about the history of the Matthew Lyon Award, but also they were interested in just the whole issue of the First Amendment, the importance of freedom of the press, freedom of speech, the right to know the truth. And so it's an honor to be here to share some thoughts on that. The First Amendment has been critical to the establishment of this nation, this state, and even here in the town of Fairhaven, which, as was noted, Matthew Lyon. As many of you know, the First Amendment provides for 5 freedoms. And I always like to tell people it's the most important one. That's why it's the First Amendment. So those of us who are in the press love to point that out. If you know all 5 freedoms, you're great. If you know them in order, all the better. I always tell people the order is pretty easy to remember. If you think about this country and when it was founded, one of the #1 reasons people came here was freedom of religion, the right to be able to practice their religion in America. #2 is the freedom of speech. Obviously, that's so important to be able to speak your mind, whether it's at a Fairhaven Select Board meeting, on the floor of the State House, writing letters or whatever. Freedom of press is the 3rd freedom. You need to be able to share that message that you have through print so others can be informed. 4th freedom is the right to assemble, which the legislature assembles, the select board assembles, you're free to assemble. And you're free to assemble in church to honor your religion, practice your faith, whatever. And last but not least is the right to petition government for grievances. If you don't like what they're doing, you have the right to file a petition. And those are the 5 freedoms in order, and that's what makes the First Amendment so important. That's what Matthew Lyon lived for, those rights under the First Amendment, for him to be able to speak and to print. I did want to mention one other thing. We often hear the phrase, the right to know, and everything like that. I contend that that is only a partial phrase. What you really are saying is you have the right to know the truth. Many times the word the truth is not included in that. And that's what you're asking for as citizens, the right to know the truth. What is really the story? When I was presented the award for Matthew Lyon, Governor Peter Shumlin said, he asked if he could come across the street in Montpelier and offer a few comments during the presentation. And that's when he said something to the effect of, Mike Donahue, I've never known him not to love a public record in Vermont. And he's got a reputation of going after public records. And it's important because the records actually tell you what the truth is about what's going on. We also have another saying in the media, how do you know the truth? There's so much going on today. The saying in the media is, when your mother says she loves you, check it out. How do you know the truth? How do you know she loves you? And reporters come back to the office and they say, hey, I found this out. And it's like, well, how do you know it's true? Well, so-and-so said it at the meeting. You go, well, that doesn't necessarily make it true. I mean, how do you know it's true? And And that's what reporters try to live by, trying to find the truth. I had, as I said, I had an interest in public records. They're essential for you to understand government. I was given a tip as a young reporter about the governor, seated here, or Thomas Chittenden, but a governor was passing out governor's pardons like candy. And I did a story and did a request, and I was told there were 40 pardons, and they wouldn't give me the names. And we did a story, and there was a big fight. The Attorney General said, you told the governor you got to give up the records. The governor's lawyer, personal lawyer, told him there was a lawsuit filed to block the governor from giving out the records, the public records. 21 months later, the Vermont Supreme Court ruled that I was entitled to those records, and when they turned over the records, there were approximately 279 pardons that had been granted. Now, obviously the pardons kept going, but it taught me, they told me 40 initially, 21 months later we're up to 279, I think it was. And it's like, how do you know how many there are? Show me the documents. It was partly that case in my career that I think helped me win the Matthew Lyon Award. I was asked to explain why the EPA picked Matthew Lyon to name its First Amendment Award. I think it's pretty obvious from what you heard today. I mean, he is legendary in fighting. I mean, to be reelected to Congress, to jail. But it just seemed obvious that he would be the person we would honor. I was also asked just to name some of the people and explain why they got the award, what it means, and everything like that. Our first winner was U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy, former Chittenden County State's Attorney. In both jobs, always knew the public had a right to know the truth, and he acted on it throughout his entire career. Second winner was Edward Cashman, former court clerk, former state prosecutor, former judge. Worked so that the media could report no matter what his job was. He understood the importance of the media. He refused to close courtrooms. He refused to seal documents. He just believed in the public's right to know. Third winner was Robert Hemley, who's a First Amendment lawyer from Burlington. He fought closing of courtrooms, fought sealing of records, denial of public records. A lot of reporters have had to fight subpoenas in their lifetime. I was given 18 subpoenas in my career by what I say are lazy lawyers who wanted me to do their work for them and to turn over my notebook to them and let them find out what I knew instead of them investigating. And each time, Bob Hemley stepped up and was able to convince a judge it wasn't proper for me to be an arm of the defense or the prosecution. The next person to get it was Greg Sanford, the state archivist. Great guy for maintaining, restoring, saving government records from our original days as a state. It's just crucial that we have those so people can go in and access those and do research, whatever. The Alan Gilbert, executive director of the ACLU, former reporter with the Times-Argus and Rutland Herald, for fighting for greater public access to government records, public disclosure of police misconduct. Ken Squire, in his radio station WDEV AM and FM in Waterbury, for long-term efforts to inform Vermonters about state, local issues. Happens to be a good friend of Governor Scott. From his days at Thunder Road. And the last one to get it is Joe Chaquette, longtime lobbyist for the Press Association, for all kinds of First Amendment issues, staying on top of them, for public accountability, records, open meetings. He was the eyes and ears in the state. We don't give it's not given every year, the Matthew Lyon Award. It was intended to be periodic when there was a worthy person, but the VPA is always looking for nominations. So if you know of somebody who's been a pain in the side of enough officials or judges or politicians, don't be afraid to pass their name along for consideration. They're always looking for nominations. So that's a little bit about the thing. I would just say in closing, I was in the jail, Jen's jail here beforehand, and Roy Newton took my picture. And I don't know if anybody knows, but the actual cell block is still in existence. He was jailed in Virgins. And I was talking to the police chief in Virgins a few years ago, and somehow we got talking about Matthew Lyon. He says, oh yeah, the cell block is down behind the Public Works garage. They pull it out every year and put it in the park, and I forget whether it's the Lions or Rotary or somebody. They lock everybody up, and you got to bail out $100 and you donate money. It's a charitable thing, but the actual cell block that Matthew Lyon supposedly served his time in the Virgins jail is still down there in Virgins. And I talked to some of the Historical Society people down there, tried to figure out a way to get it better displayed and get it out of the elements. And I think they're looking at that. We're trying to maybe get a historic marker like the Vermont Historical, the green ones that you see on the side of the road, to actually show where on Vermont 22A, which I passed by, where the cell block or where the jail was and everything like that. So just a little bit of history that apparently they say that's the cell block that Matthew Lyon was in jail back a couple hundred years. So that's a little bit of the history, and I will turn it back to the Senator.
So, on behalf of the Fairhaven Historical Society, thank you all for attending today. Please stay if you can and enjoy the festivities of the Matthew Lyon Day celebration, including the inaugural Matthew Lyon Pumpkin Seed Spitting Contest for kids or adults, the Matthew Lyon coloring pages, sack races, as well as free ice cream, free popcorn, free hot dogs, and drinks available. Thank you all very much for attending.
We are co-equal branches, I'll not attend to thee. We are co-equal branches on the tree of democracy. We are co-equal branches, I'm not on bended knee.
For tradition of the House, upon inauguration, the members shall attend to His Excellency the President. He is the heir to the American throne. Let it be known, we have a traitor here.
We are co-equal branches on the tree of democracy. We are co-equal branches, I'll not attend to thee. Mirror, Mr. President.
Democracy.
Mirror, Mr. President.
I'll not attend to these. We are co-equal branches.